headquarters highlights an 80-acre campus housing programs and services for tribal members. Elsewhere, the Choctaw Casino and Resort, Durant, dazzles visitors with its first-class accommodations, gaming, and entertainment. For a nature-inspired getaway, Lake Durant and Lake Texoma offer visitors and residents alike tranquil waters for fishing and boating, as well as hiking trails by day and campsites for the night. Known as the City of Magnolias, Durant's Magnolia Festival of Oklahoma is the most popular of the city's community events, attracting upwards of 20,000 visitors each year. And for a campus of 1,000 Magnolias, there's Southeastern Oklahoma State University with more than 70 majors, 4-year and graduate programs, theater, arts, and cultural events for the entire community.
With amenities for every We'll call the meeting to order here at 5:30. Drew, will you provide our invocation, please?
Pray with me, please. Father God, as always, we are so grateful to be in your presence and have the opportunity to serve our community. Father God, I just ask that you give us the grace and wisdom to do it well. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Would you please stand for our flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Kevin Keener,
Here.
Drew Jackson,
Here.
Clint Horner, Shane Knight,
Here.
Whitney Kerr. Here.
Our first order of business is consent items. We have one item, item 1A, under consent items, consideration approval of regular meeting minutes of December 7th, 2021.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please. Did that already show up? Did I miss it? Okay. No problem. Let's see, no items removed, no information items, no administration items. We'll go to item 5, public hearings. 5A, discussion, consideration, and possible action on PC 2022-01, rezoning request for property located at 802 Rodeo Road. Danielle?
Yes, this is the applicant requesting a rezoning to go from A1 General Agriculture to C3 General Commercial. The purpose behind it is so that they can have their, continue having their business out there. At the time of this request, we did receive a letter of protest. The property itself is 4.6 acres and does have a shop building on the property. The applicant does have some requested additional terms that's in your packet that he would like to be, if this is recommended for approval and approved, he would like to go along with that. The area is mostly of agriculture zoning, so there is a concern of it being considered spot zoning since there is no commercial zoning in that area. There's a couple notes about the facade and the off-street parking that is kind of tied to some of the terms that the applicant was asking for. The current future land use map does have this area as low-density residential, and so therefore the rezoning request is not in line with the current future land use map. And as far as from staff's point of view, the concern is obviously the spot zoning and the not being in line with the future land use map. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The applicant's also here if you have questions for him.
So I do have a question.
Sure.
So the rezone, I mean, I read the application, all that, but the rezoning is, the trucking business is not in question, but they're wanting to start doing cattle sales of some sort out of this business, and that's why they're seeking the rezoning.
Correct. They received and the trucking business was, they received a letter of violation basically regarding the trucking business, and so that's why that's not an issue. And I don't know if that's going to be something that he's going to continue out there or not. But part of the terms was that it would be that the shop building would remain how it is, as well as the gravel driveway and gravel parking.
So as it relates to the cattle sales portion of this, are we talking about like a livestock auction, or what are we talking about?
The way he explained it to me, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, was that they were just looking at they just have like regular sales of people coming on the land and selling the cattle to general people that may come up, not necessarily like an actual auction, to my understanding.
In terms of the trucking, is the current use considered like the motor freight, or how are we categorizing that? I'm looking at the zoning classifications.
Sure, how we classified that is auto repair, essentially. We didn't really have anything that was specifically for trucking business, but with understanding that obviously there's a shop there, and so most likely there's work that, you know, goes on with the trucks.
So is the business mainly auto repair, or is it trucking in terms of shipping? If it's shipping, it's motor freight, right?
Correct. Whenever I talked with Tom about it a while back, it was, and I can't remember exactly that conversation, how he worded it, but we leaned more towards the auto repair than we did the motor freight.
Because the use is repair primarily?
It's mainly trucking. He says he stores his trailers and the trucks out there, and not anymore, but I think there might be one or two left out there, but that was for the most part taken care of, I believe. Sean was handling that
When it's
side.
time, I may have him clarify.
Yeah, I would definitely have him. He would know more than I would on that.
Thanks.
Sure. You're welcome.
So, one more thing.
Sure.
So, if this is rezoned to C3, then they're gonna be in violation, at least from the building's perspective, of one of the ordinances, and they have to have some sort of facade, correct?
Correct. And they're asking for them not to have a facade on it. They're asking for it to remain metal. But the ordinance does specifically state if it's not zoned as ag, because it doesn't qualify for ag or industrial, but if it's zoned as commercial, then it would be required to be facade. And same with the off-street parking, and that's for all zoning districts. It doesn't matter whether it's ag or commercial on that.
In the past, have we grandfathered in other buildings when we're doing a rezoning like this? I mean, that struck me as being an issue.
Right. Honestly, since I've been here, I don't recall having that being an issue, or coming up in this format. So I don't believe so, at least since I've been here.
Did this get to us tonight because of a violation issued by the city for running a business on agriculture, or because they're wanting to build a building for a business on agriculture?
If I had to, and I will let the applicant kind of explain further, but if I had to take a guess, I would say most likely it has to do with the violation.
My question on the rezone, I'm not seeing that the rezoning it is going to, even with the C3 rezone, it doesn't, I mean, it's got parking's restricted, and like I don't see what the C3 is gonna do. Like I don't see how it gives permission to do what they're asking for.
It would allow them to do like the cattle sales, which is allowed in a commercial district, including C3. And I don't recall, I'd have to go back and look at the table real quick on the freight side of it, and the, as far as the auto repair side of it.
So auto repair, I could see that, but so what's the cattle sales? What's that considered in our chart?
That was livestock, I believe. Let me look. I believe, I'm not finding exactly what I'm looking for, but I remember them, whenever we had this come up in a previous case where we had the livestock auction place that was up for rezoning, and actually that was not allowed to occur in ag, but it was allowed in commercial.
Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we just establish that it was not gonna be an auction?
It is not, but it's that same type of premise where it's actual sales of livestock. It's not just it's not just his personal herd that's gonna be on the lot, if that makes sense.
I got you.
Did you have further questions for me at the moment?
Oh, I do. I thought you were looking at financials for
I'm
somebody
still
else.
looking, but I didn't know if you want to talk to the applicant while I'm still looking too.
No, I still have questions for
Okay,
you.
sure, go ahead.
So the violation report that they got,
Mm-hmm.
is this a business, the trucking part of the business, is this a business that's been operating legally all this time and they just now hit a violation, or is this something that we just caught after 13 years of?
Pretty much, it was something that was caught, just within the last year or so that was caught as far as it being an actual business.
Okay. My second question is, to what extent is the city, I mean, and the applicant can kind of fill in what this level of cattle sales is, but obviously the city has restrictions on having livestock, where you can store them, things like that. But to what extent has the city actually been monitoring that situation? I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there's not a lot of places in Durant that have enough room to hold or move cattle, but there are a few. And
Right.
so I'm just curious as to if the city's actually monitoring that and has been monitoring that before. Are we sticking these applicants with something new? I guess I don't know if that made sense.
I think so. So
Okay.
let me take a stab and see if we're going in the right direction. So we really have not been monitoring as far as the cattle operations and things like that. Now, if we get a complaint, most of this complaint driven, if we get a violation of this type. So if we get a violation, then we'll go out and look and see, hey, is this an issue? Is this actually going on or not? And then we'll handle it from there. So it's nothing new as far as that end of it. But as you know, within the last couple of years in city management's big push is to make sure that all ordinances are followed. So that's kind of something that's not been the way it's been in the past, and so that's the new piece, I guess you could say.
Any other questions for Danielle while she's? No. Okay. Mr. Smith, we'll hassle you with some questions.
Yes, sir. How are you this evening?
Good. If you will, state your name when you get up here, please.
Philip Smith.
I did have a question on how long your business been operating here at this location, or been in business at this location?
I started the trucking company in 2008, and I worked it out of my house. We used to park everything at Graham's Truck Center in Calera. 2010, I had the option to lease purchase that place from Jimmy Clark. Jimmy built that place in 2008, or started building it in 2008. He ran Cyclone propane out of it for 3 or 4 years. Never was an issue with the business at that point. We signed the contract on it in 2008, and I think we got away from the lease to the actual purchase in 12.
Okay.
But we've been there since 2010.
Okay.
My business has. At one point, we did run an auto repair out of there where we worked on other people's trucks and trailers and everything. We abided by all city, state laws and all that and everything. We actually even paid city sales tax back to the city of Durant. They collected city sales tax for 5 or 6 years from us. There was never an issue at that point whenever they were collecting city sales tax.
So did you get the violation letter that we're hearing about? Did you get a letter from the city stating that business is in violation, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And as Ms. O'Neill stated, there's really not an ordinance that says that I can't do what I do there. I was asked about this, I think it was back about 2015, whenever Ms. Shear was the city manager. Ms. Shear let us work under a different ordinance of 7206B. Says that we were allowed to park as long as we were on private property. Then that come back under Mr. Rundle, another complaint or whatever. Me and Rundle, we just handle it over the telephone. I told him what, we had done in the past and everything, and he said, yeah, he said, you're correct. He said, you can park under, 7206. He said, that's not an issue. So I've had a couple issues with the city here recently. This complaint come from another property owner that is by me, is what it come from.
Okay.
With that being said, the ones that do adjoin me, that were sent, notifications by the city, nobody's in contestants of it.
Okay. Can you give us some information on the cattle sales, or what we're talking about when talk about having cattle or livestock? And
It does sound bad. We keep roughly anywhere from 75 to 100 head dry lotted, which is for a feedlot purpose. You just give them all the hay, all the feed they can eat. They come to the feed bunk. You don't want them walking the weight off of them and everything. Dr. Ferguson, he lives across the road from me. He's the vet that looks at everything. I mean, I overfeed my cattle according to him. We do sell calves there, if that's what you're asking. Yes, we do. That being said, everything that is on the property does not, as Ms. O'Neill stated, it does not belong, all the cattle does not belong to me.
Okay.
If somebody else brings them there for me to feed out, then I feed them out for them.
What kind of sale do you have? Do you have an auction, or do you have a pre?
No, I mean, like if you wanted to come and buy, 5 or 6 feeders to take to Tuckers, and, because the USDA changed the deal back where, I think it was during COVID, to where anybody can sell beef out of their house now. So, I mean, that's the sales of it. That being said, though, if we do sell something, we would have to pay, sales tax off of it.
Okay.
So fair to say this is a feedlot?
Do what, sir?
Fair to say it's a feedlot?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, we buy those calves 200 to 300 pounds. Actually, as soon as we get done here, I'm going to go load 31 or 32 of them and take them to El Reno tonight to the sale barn at El Reno. We get them up to about 700 pounds and then take them onto another feedlot, or to a sale barn, and they take them onto another feedlot from there.
Ms. O'Neill, while you're looking, you might look for where feedlot goes in terms of uses.
I think the only thing I found on that was the feed purposes of it. You couldn't mix your own feed, is the way I interpreted it.
And can you clarify the trucking use?
We use it to park there. I mean, we've always used it to park there. I do work on my trucks and my trailers in the shop. I mean, we've done it ever since. I mean, ever since we've been there. Like I say, it's never been an issue until earlier this year. Then it became an issue, or last year in 2021.
So is it primarily used as a parking lot?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. We park semi-trucks there, semi-trailers there. Miss O'Neill had commented about there was still some trucks there. Whenever I did get the violation letter from Mr. Jackson, I did move everything off the property that was not ag-related. The trucks that are still on the property, they're farm tagged. There is a couple of semi-trailers there that the frames are broke on, and we use them to store feed and hay in.
In terms of a parking lot, that's restricted in any zoning? No, it's restricted on all of them. No, you're right.
Yeah, and that's what I say. We worked off of that 7206 one's what we used to work off of.
So Danielle, maybe, and you might be able to answer this question as well, but The violation from the city was for parking trucks on the property.
It was, so when the violation first went out, there was a sign on the building and everything saying that it was a trucking company. So the assumption based on what staff saw was that it was a trucking company.
Gotcha.
Given that when you see trucks on a lot, a building, and a sign that says it's a trucking company, the logical conclusion is it's a trucking company.
Yes, okay. But Mr. Smith, these are your trucks
Yes.
for your
Well,
yes. hauling, or,
Yes.
okay,
Now, every truck that is there, I don't own. There are some lease trucks that pull my trailers.
sure,
So naturally, I wouldn't own the truck.
sure.
Miss O'Neill has all, I think, maybe it's Mr. Markham that has all the contracts. Yeah, Mr. Markham might have all the contracts. He wanted a copy of all the contracts, and, he got a packet about that 4 or 5 inches thick of contracts and all kinds of different stuff.
Do you have a copy of that citation or the letter that you received?
Let me look real
Okay.
quick. You want to see it, Mr. Keener?
Yes, please.
I believe that ordinance isn't the one that's wrote on there. That's the one that you said was for auto or something, because you couldn't find one to do with trucks, right?
Right.
Yes.
We don't have, and even, so I've been doing some looking, and there's not really anything that covers feedlots or anything like that. There is something in the ordinances under agriculture that talks about that it cannot be agricultural zoning. It may even mention in there about needing it to be a commercial zoning. It's within the definition somewhere, of that. But yes, and obviously the table of uses will not cover every single use imaginable, and is relatively probably outdated at this point, to be honest. But, there are, so whenever we're looking at, we have to find something that's as close as possible to that use to be able to make that assumption under. So, but that's what we have to do currently, because there's nothing, we're not getting everything. So I could not find something specifically for feedlot or cattle operation or anything like that. So, when we're looking at it, we can look at it as they're gonna have obviously an office type of thing out there where transactions are gonna occur, within the building that's currently there, most likely. But there isn't anything as far as feedlots, so.
I'm gonna read this violation letter, and anybody can read it if they want to, but it was sent on November 12th, 2021, and the specific violation is 157.031, uses permitted in districts, and it says running a business on property that is currently zoned Ag A1, general agricultural. Says you got to take corrective action, go from there, but it's running a business on a property zoned A1 is the specific violation. So,
Livestock sales and feeding facilities is found under 157.055.
Anybody could answer this question, but I'm going to ask you, Danielle. Is there something that I'm not aware of that's against having a business on an agricultural piece of property? Because I'm going to say every farmer in Oklahoma probably has a business license for their farm.
Right, and
Okay.
that's there again, that's kind of how it's defined within the ordinances as far as what that is.
Yeah.
And that is gonna be changing as well, most likely. So, as far as being able to run a business If it was a home-based business, it would be allowed within, depending on what it is, it would most likely be allowed in basically your residential or even ag zone properties. But when it's just strictly a business, that's where it's gotta make sure it falls under the correct category. Unfortunately, in this instance, you're having a business that didn't necessarily follow under a home-based business at all, cause there's no home there. And it's strictly a business being ran on ag property, which, yes, is not, it doesn't meet the ag uses.
Okay.
Drew, even in the livestock portion where it's talking about livestock auction, it doesn't reference what zoning class it should be in, does it?
It just says not ag.
Yeah,
I know the Durant stuff on is commercial. The one on South Ninth Street.
yeah.
Right.
It's dual zone.
It is.
For some reason, it's dual zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like A1, C3. C2 or C3? C2 or C3.
That's my, I'm scratching my head on, I don't know that, I'm trying to find a way, a path forward. I don't know that we have a zoning that meets the use. So, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, is that we don't have something that tells us where livestock auctions should be, and then it says don't have a feedlot in ag, and
Right.
so where does it come into, existing non-conforming? At what point is that an existing
So-
non-conforming use?
It would have to be a use that was in place prior to the zoning being done or it being annexed into the city, which we did look at when it was annexed in. It was annexed in back in the 80s, if I remember correctly. And it came in being zoned as ag. So there's never been any rezoning done to that piece of property. And then as far as the building was built around 2008, 2009-ish. And then there's several other things that's been in place before that. There's several ordinances that were placed before that should have affected the building of it, but it did not for whatever reason back then. But, including the off-street parking requirements, that should have been taken care of when the building was built. But it wasn't. But that's usually when we're looking at non-conforming, that's the two top things we look at, when it was annexed, and if the use changed or, if it was rezoned at any point and when the ordinances came into play, that deals with that.
Was it permitted when it was built?
The building, I do not know. We only keep building permits for about 5 years and that's it. So we don't keep, that's by state law, we're only required to hang on to for 5 years. There may be something in the attic possibly that's older than that, but I haven't seen one. That I'm not sure who was even here back then to know if they did a permit on it.
I do know on the permit part of it, whenever Lisa Jackson was
If you will, come over here in case somebody's wanting to hear
the
what.
city fire marshal, she did come and do an inspection of it, cause I talked to her about it here a while back. And she,
When it was built originally?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And
So
Mr. Hall come and looked at it about a year and a half ago. I think about a year and a half ago.
What was the purpose of that?
We were gonna put a marijuana grow there,
Okay.
yeah.
So
And
you
he didn't have no issues with what was going on at that purpose,
Okay.
at that point either.
Did I misunderstand, or did you say that feeding was not permitted in ag?
It
feedlots?
says in ag, like in the definition, it says, the way I interpret it,
Where's that?
it's in, let's see if it's in definitions here. It's in definitions of the 157.006.
I see it.
Drag. See if you read that differently. So let's talk about parking for a second. If the application says parking, but sounds like the interpretation is auto service. Is that right?
Right, because at the, as I said, at the time whenever this initial violation occurred, there was a sign on the building saying the name of the trucking company and trucks with the name of the trucking company and trailers that were leased to those trucks on the property. So the assumption is that it's a trucking company. And as I said, there's nothing in the current ordinances, the state trucking company or anything of that would be remotely to that. And so the next logical one was the only thing, closest thing we found was auto repair, was the closest one that we found that was remotely close to it.
I guess my question though is that the application saying is applying for parking. It's not applying for auto.
It's applying for a rezoning and part of the stipulations that he wants is to keep a metal building and keep a gravel drive.
Right.
And the gravel drive and all that, there's an ordinance that was put in place in 2005 that states that basically off-street had to be, and it doesn't matter the zoning, had to be, the asphalt, et cetera.
Right.
So,
So that's what I'm saying though. We're talking about auto and then we're talking about parking and then like,
right, so essentially
the
whenever
application's
he,
asking for parking though. That's,
the application, whenever he came to me and he looked at the application, it says to be able to run the feed operation, his cattle
Right.
operation off of it.
and parking, like it specifically, unless I misread.
No, it says and
And parking, correct, yes. And that's, I mean, according to the zoning ordinances, the parking is not allowable use. A parking lot itself is not allowable use in agriculture either. So has restricted between R1 through I2, I believe.
Well, it looks like it's,
Or is it no.
well, it doesn't have an X. It doesn't even,
If it doesn't have an X, it's not permitted.
so it's,
However,
it doesn't have it's not, A1 or R1 doesn't have an X
Okay.
or an R, but the rest of them have an R.
correct,
So in that case, would they need a conditional use permit since it's restricted?
correct, for a parking lot, if it's just gonna be a parking lot.
Yeah.
But it's not just gonna be a parking lot, obviously, because there's a building there. Does that make sense?
Well, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around is the
Right.
application says parking and then,
Right,
We're-
so that's kind of the conundrum that we're facing as well, from the staff perspective, is he's saying parking.
Right.
But there's a building there, so it's not gonna be a parking lot, obviously, that's gonna be open to the public.
Right.
It's just gonna be his personal lot.
yeah,
Please.
That falls back what she was saying about the not accessible to the public. That's what was brought up whenever Ms. Shear was here. And like I say, with the 7206, it states that if it's on private property, and as far as I'm under the presumption, private is not accessible to the public.
Unless it's a business. Which is gonna be an open lot. Sorry, I didn't even drink.
I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm
Oh,
just, I'm trying to see how.
I'm trying to
how do
help
we get
explain.
how do we get from here to
Right,
there?
and I'm trying to help kind
Yeah.
of explain the different pieces and,
Yeah.
except there's a lot of moving parts, I get it.
Yeah.
So it's been a really long day. So,
You were saying his parking lot was going to be
Thank you.
public,
thank you, sorry, my
or
brain
you were
just
going
stopped
to
for a
explain
minute.
that.
Yes, so when you're having a business that's on the property, then you're gonna obviously have some public that's gonna be coming onto your lot. So it's not just for personal use, if that makes sense. So it's not like you're having a residence and there's no one else is gonna come on your property unless you have visitors or whatever. But if you have a business, you're obviously gonna have public that's gonna be coming onto your property for whatever means of that business. For whether it's to buy cattle or,
And yeah, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. So if someone lives in town and runs an LLC out of their home, are you saying that's a public business?
it would need to be, depending on what the business is, they would need a home occupation. It might mean the home occupation, which is a whole separate ordinance. And there's only certain criteria that is required for a home business, but you need a home and it only has to meet, I think it's like less than 20% of the area of the house, and nothing can be altered, and it has to be residential uses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a long list of that for a home occupation, so it's a little different. 'cause I mean, it could be like an LLC of a hair salon, for example, which is probably a really bad one, but as an
That's
example.
not a good example, yeah.
Yeah, no, okay, so we'll use a different one. A piano teacher is
Okay.
running a business
That's
out
better,
of her,
that's better.
yeah, out of her home, and she's teaching piano lessons at her house, okay? So that's technically a business, so she would need to follow that home occupation. But again, it wouldn't require, she'd have to make sure it follows all the other criteria of a home occupation, if that makes any sense at all. Hopefully it does.
So,
As far as his question,
yeah. So let's say it wasn't a spot zoning issue.
okay,
So let's say it's no problem.
okay?
And so is C3 the answer? So he's in accordance, he's in line, he's following all the rules with C3.
As close as what we can tell, yes. As
Is that
close as
any
what we
closer
can-
than A1 though? I mean, that's the part I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Right, but with it being the A1, it specifically says you can't sell cattle, you can't have a cattle auction, you can't have feedlot, blah, 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 in agriculture, then that limits what you can do, and being able to have, and not having a home on the lot also restricts it, because then it can't be a home occupation. So then you're kinda left with, as a business itself, being ran off of an ag lot, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
C3 does it say you have permission to run a feedlot?
It does not, but and that's something that we're gonna have to address whenever we get ready for this, ordinance rewrite, which is coming, but, there's nothing that specifically says feedlot. So you're kinda looking at it from a perspective of, what I've looked at it is, what's it being used for, the closest that we can tell. And then kind of using it as if it's a C3, then you're allowed like C2, CO, and in that as well. So, and having an office type of thing is allowed in C3. So that's kind of where it was at the last time I looked at it, so. We was trying to make heads or tails of it, as close as we got.
So not to be insensitive to, finding the solution, but, the question before us is, does C3 fit in this location or not? It's my opinion, it doesn't. So, committee might consider, tabling and giving, staff additional time to finding the right solution, or going and voting and move it to council and hoping that they have more clear answers at that time. But as much as we would like to find a solution outside of spot zoning, that's not what's on the agenda.
Sure.
I mean, I just wanna reemphasize that, we've been in business in this town, since 2008. If I'm not allowed to continue, business on my property, I mean, we either have to do one or two things, either one, sell out and put people on the unemployment line, or move to a different town. I mean, that's, that's really the only options that,
Did I understand that the request was primarily because of the cattle feedlot and stuff? There was an argument that you have for being able to park your own trucks there, right?
do what now, sir?
You referenced 7206 as
Yes.
your reasons for being able to park there.
Yes,
So if I understand right, the additional push for you to pursue different zoning was the feedlot,
yes, sir. Yeah, for two options.
which is a new business for you.
No, I mean, I've been doing it
Since when?
last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, it was Ag 1. I mean, I was just under this presumption, it's agricultural use.
I think hopefully you can tell by, the time that we've spent, talking, we want to find a solution for you.
Yes.
My question that I'm posing to the committee members is continue the discussion in this format, the right time and place, or do we kick it back offline, so that we can work and have a better recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, with
So, I'm certainly not being insensitive to
no,
your position
I understand that, yes.
or your livelihood.
The only thing that, you were saying that you thought maybe it should go back and let the staff continue to look at it. I mean, they've been looking at it for almost a year now, and they haven't come to a resolution in almost a year.
So I think, again, the options are to take a vote or to table.
So I think part of my problem, part of my struggle with this is we've got kind of this question of the violation going over here, but for me, that's not our question. I think there are some serious issues around the violation procedure and whether or not, I do think there's a violation that's been going on because it's a feedlot. I disagree with some of the interpretation for how we're classifying what is agricultural, whether or not a home is required on it. But again, that's not what we're here to ask and what we're here to answer. I mean, that's all violation related. That's a totally different department. For me, it really comes down to, should we rezone this property? And I've got to tell you, all other considerations aside, all other questions, everything else, I'm somewhat opposed because, I mean, to me, this is a question of spot zoning because we're leaping over, I mean, this is right in the middle of an agricultural section. There is commercial that's not that far away, but there's not a connector there. We're just jumping right on over and making this asking to make this a C3. That's a problem for me, apart from any of these other questions, any of these other thought processes about violation, use of property, any of that stuff. So I guess my long and short of it is, I think that even without really addressing the question that he's asking about what the appropriate zone is, I mean, for me, I think I have an answer without going through that process just because of the first part of the issue of, to me, this is spot zoning. So my perspective is I'd rather vote on it and send it on to council to let council do what they want to do with it. Oops, sorry, got a little wild there. But that's just my thought process.
I agree.
Same. And I think I would entertain a potential spot zoning if it made sense for this situation, but C3 puts him in no better position, in my opinion, than the A1 that he's already in.
Is consideration of a conditional use something that we could recommend further exploration or not? I don't know that it does.
So if we tabled the item, just so that we are clear, if we tabled the item, it'd have to come back exactly how it is. There could be no changes done, nothing. So it would have to come back exactly how it is next month if it's tabled. So I'm just letting you guys know that in case you guys are thinking that, but.
Has the size of this lot or this piece of property, has it changed since you bought it back in whenever the
No, sir.
title transferred?
No, if you look at the map, the highlighted, the bold red, I own it, and then there's an L shape to the right of it. You see that? Looks like where the road would curve there, and it just like dead ends right there.
How many acres are you wanting to rezone?
Just the 4 point. I think it's like
Shows 4.6.
4.6, yes.
And you run both businesses on like 4.6 acres?
Well, I use the other property also, sir.
Okay.
Yes. It's all combined. It's separate deeds.
My reason for asking that question, if the size of the lots changes, we get back into, I mean, you're supposed to have 5 acres for ag even, and so even in its current state, it's not conforming just due to its lot size, so.
Yeah, there's several of those in that area though,
Yeah.
that are not.
Yeah.
As for the spot zoning, I understand it's commercial. I mean, we did rezone that whole north section down there as residential here a while back. I mean, and there was no other residential in the area.
Yeah, and that's stated in ag. Ag is a kind of a holding zone.
Yeah.
And for our for residential, so that's a natural progression to go from ag to R1 especially.
Yes.
And so that would make more sense.
Yeah, I think on the futures, it comes like, what, 850 foot is where it comes.
How close it is, but it's
Yeah.
it does not touch it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't touch it. It comes to just to the west of the railroad bed
Yeah.
there.
Like 2 pages down. Yeah, I think the big issue there is that commercial's gonna face the highway, or that's the intention, to access off the highway, but
Yeah, there in Rodeo, yes.
If he's
So-
using the other acreage for feedlot, regardless of who owns it, that would need to be rezoned as well. If it doesn't belong in ag.
yeah.
That other L shape. I think you're correct.
I wish I had a good answer. I don't have one. So
I think we're at this crux that we see quite often as Durant is developing further and the city's starting to manage our ordinances a little better than they have in the past, that we run into these scenarios where our ordinances are way outdated for where we were even 10 years ago. So things like Mr. Smith is facing here now, he's on the fence. He doesn't really fall into C3. He doesn't really fall into A1. I mean, I don't feel like there's a way to go, in my opinion, until this ordinance revision that we've been talking about for as long as I can remember happens.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move to deny the request.
I'll second.
Call for the vote, please. Hey, Mr. Smith, you probably familiar, I know you participated in some other hearings that we've had from other rezones in your area out there, but our vote is a recommendation to the council. Council makes the decision, and their meeting is next week, so it's on the 11th, and so I just wanted to make you aware of that we're not the final decision.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are you done with that?
I am, yes. Yep. We'll move to item 5B, discussion, consideration, and possible action of PC 2022-02, rezoning request for property located near Hillcrest Avenue and McLean Drive. Danielle?
This is a rezoning request from SG Blocks, who is in the process of purchasing this 20 acres from the Durant Industrial Authority. Their hope is to provide a new multifamily residential development in that location. This one has no letters of protest or phone calls of any type. The area is about 20 acres. The area is has a mix of residential and industrial. Just as a note, you guys saw a letter in there allowing the DIA to be able to go through the rezoning process. They are in the process of selling this. Tom Markham recommended and helped draft the letter to allow for the SG Blocks to apply for the rezoning. SG Blocks actually requested to be in the contract of it being to be rezoned to R3, even though they don't necessarily have to, with the way the ordinance is currently written. But they wanted it in there so that they could try to do the right thing and do what's supposed to be done. So, the future land use map does have this as industrial land uses, and so that therefore it's not in line with the future land use map. And that is all that I have. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And the applicant's also here.
Any questions for Danielle? Okay. Thank you. You want to say something?
Why not?
You look like it, yeah.
I'm just
Come on
sitting
up.
over here.
Yeah,
Marathon meeting. I thought the city council meeting was long.
yeah. Please state your name.
Rocky Butler with SG Blocks. I just want to say that this project is viewed by many in the community and as well as for the SG Blocks as something that's an asset to the city of Durant, and this will provide as well as to the community that's existing. This will provide a housing options for the community, and we're putting this in here for a purpose, a greater purpose for the industrial needs that's going on as well in the community. But it also will provide and move more utility receivables to you for the city. The reason that we went from, when I came to this town a year and a half ago, I was looking for a facility for SG Blocks that we could find the proper environment, the proper community, the proper opportunity, and also centrally located in the United States for us to feed our national need. Our customers are from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we originally found a facility over there on Big Locks Parkway, as you know. And we moved in there, and we've continued to find positive attributes to this community and an opportunity there where we can grow and establish our home base here. Currently, our main offices and our main corporate headquarters is in New York. We went on over to Waldron, and we're short. We have more clients and more need for our product than we have facilities. We've gone over to the Waldron Road facility, and we're now renovating that area. But we're looking now, because of the positive environment we see around here, going into a much bigger level. And that is to build a master facility and production facility for fabrication in the area. And then we discovered this 115 acres that we're looking to purchase. In doing so, in this process, this last year and a half, we were approached by literally Choctaw, approached us. And they're building, as you know, the big casino and the Sky Tower. And they have ran into a problem that we've seen, and they've brought to our attention, is that they have more jobs there, but they do not have housing to facilitate the jobs that they need. And they came to us with an urgency to build housing for their community so that they could actually have more employees and to be able to fill in the positions they have at their casino and the new Sky Tower. Well, that brought it to our attention that if we're going to develop this facility, or develop a facility, a master plan facility of a much bigger level, and we want to bring in more jobs, we're not going to be able to find those people if we don't have better housing community. Now, being that we are a company that builds residential housing in a modular level, as well as we do residential, commercial, as well as industrial, is that we want to make sure that we don't fall into the same trap that Choctaw fell into. So we're asking for this residential area and this industrial zone that we're at for two purposes. First of all, where we're moving our plant is right across the street from a current residential area. And if they were to have industrial buildings right there 25 foot off their property line at that road across the street, it would be devastating to the existing community. It wouldn't be a right way to be in harmony with the community. But secondly, us adding that residential buffer there, that R3, that acts as a bridge between the current R1, R2 to our industrial level, and would be an asset to both ourselves, giving us more housing for the needs for new employees coming into the community, as well as adding as a buffer and a bridge between the existing residents. And that's where we are at this point. And for us to build a facility of this magnitude, we see that we have to have housing that can accommodate them. And we want, again, if Choctaw ran into the trap, we don't want to fall into the same thing. Any questions?
I'm sure there is. Any questions? Comments?
I think the only comment that I would have would be, regarding the future land use map. Shane and I both made comments as we were reviewing that we'd like those transitions to be off of the roadways. We used, Chuck Wall and I think was it First Street as examples, and those two examples got moved. But that wasn't, that concept was not extrapolated throughout the rest of the plan. So we've also been asking for transitions between different zonings. Transitional zonings have been up of conversation, so although it specifically doesn't agree with the future land use map, I think it does agree with the intent that we've talked about as a committee to have a buffer between the residential that's immediately across the street. So I guess I just wanted to address that rebuttal directly.
I agree with Drew. We've seen this property more than once in the last year, and I think we heard some cries from some citizens in the area over part of this at one point. So my personal feeling is an R3 buffer along that road is a welcome addition to separating the I zoning that's there now.
Any other comments or questions?
And I'm excited to see this type of development, Durant. I think it's
Thanks, Shane.
fantastic.
Thank you, sir.
I'll make a motion we approve as requested.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for vote, please. Thank you for your
Thank you,
presentation,
Kevin.
Jeff.
Appreciate it.
You bet. Item 6, new business. Any new business?
I'll give you a couple updates real quick.
Okay.
Regarding as the Transitional Zoning Committee kind of was mentioned, we did get a meeting set up with a firm that has dealt with similar type of what we're looking for, more or less, in the other communities across Oklahoma and Texas. So we have a committee meeting set up with them later this month. And then also, we are near getting completed on getting the RFQ and the proposals to council in order to have them approved. So that should be coming forthwith, and the timeline on that to be completed is probably about 18 to 24 months
The RFQ for,
for the land use ordinances,
okay,
for the rewrite.
sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second.